Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CERTCon 2021, the virtual conference where we are celebrating you, the everyday CERT. Thank you for joining us at the 10th CERT conference in the National Capital Region. This session is Emotional Survival During Challenging Times. It's being presented by Sue McLean. My name is Celine Bino, and I am joined by Betsy Gartner. We are your host and moderator for this session. I'm going to introduce Sue and then just go over a couple of housekeeping notes. Sue McLean has over 35 years of varied professional experience in mental health. She has worked as a school psychologist, coordinated a drug crisis center, treated the chronically mentally ill, and served as an account executive for an EAP. Her current work involves management consultation, training, and crisis disaster response. After 9/11, Sue provided services to clients in both Virginia and New York, and also responded at the Washington Navy Yard. As a member of the Arlington CERT for 15 years and serving as Deputy 1, she provides training in disaster preparedness, psychological first aid, and disaster mental health. In addition, Sue is an Until Help Arrives instructor and teaches CPR and AED. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sue McLean.
What we're going to cover today is the stress in your life, which is for everybody is pretty tremendous right now. We're going to review psych first aid or psychological first aid. So not only can you help yourself, but you can help other people. We're going to talk about communication and active listening. And most of us think we're very good listeners, but the reality is about 80% of our communication goes wrong. So we're going to talk about that. We are not very good listeners. We like to think we are. We're going to talk about stress reduction. We're going to talk about resilience. How do we build that up? Self-care, and then a personal plan. I'm hoping that as we go through the session, that you can think a little bit about how this applies to you. And if you can just get one thing out of the session and one thing you might be able to do a little differently or be able to help yourself. Okay. Now, we're going to talk a lot about the effect of the pandemic on the whole community, obviously. And that every training I've done before has, in the last year or so, has included that. But one of the things that I decided to add to this one is societal polarization. I think it's kind of something that we don't always talk about, the political issues and things like that. But I think it's also a major stress to a lot of us. And we're going to mention that a little bit. We're not going to get into the sides of the political, who's on what side or whatever. But I do want you to consider that and see whether those things are affecting us. Okay. In the past, when we haven't mentioned them, it's kind of like the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. So we're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about how life has changed in the last year. It shows 2 out of 3 people, this pandemic has an effect on their sleep. 3 out of 4 people have had mental health issues with anxiety and depression. And I get calls all the time and emails, would you like to add people to your service? That's how it's been really tough for a lot of us. So let's look at some of the COVID kinds of things, some of the pandemic things. I think, and what I'd like you to do is think about that. And if any of these hit you, kind of jot it down in chat as to these things are have affected me. The fear and uncertainty of COVID. And I think it's a little bit less now, but it's still there. We still don't have all the answers, even now that we have the vaccines. I don't know if you had any illness in yourself or your family, whether you've gotten over it, whether you're a long hauler. Do you have any good friends? I have a good friend who will never be the same, survive. Have you had any death or loss? And that includes people, I've been talking with some friends who are Indian, and their relatives in India, they're just petrified to them because, they're feeling very powerless in terms of what they can do. The length of the quarantine is obviously way beyond what any of us have ever thought about. I don't know if it's affected your job, whether you had a business loss, or if nothing else, it's probably changed your job. You're probably working from home if you still have the job, but it's affected people financially. It's affected our routines, what we did every day, where we went, whatever. I don't know about you, but right now, I don't keep the same calendar I used to keep. And I'm going, now that we're starting to open up again, I better start doing that. What kind of family changes do you have? Are your children still at home? When are they going back to school? My favorite cartoon, frankly, is a picture of a mother on a computer working, and the kid is duct taped to the floor. So that's one thing. Have you had any mental health issues? Any anxiety, depression? They're way up during this whole thing. The social connections and the isolation, being away from friends, missing friends. Those are some of the pandemic things that I think affected us. Okay. Now, the other thing that, as I said, the elephant in the room that we haven't always talked about is the political divide. The issues about Black Lives Matter, racial biases, some of the hate stuff that's been going on towards the Asian community. In the handout of the resources that I'm reading, there's a real good article, or there's some good videos put out by the American Psychological Association called Facing the Divide. And it's talking about racism and health. There are gender identity issues. There are the political gridlock we're in right now. Congress can't seem to compromise and work together. There's January 6th. I don't know how that affected people. Those of us who live in the DC area, that affects us a little differently. Defending the Constitution, and both sides say they're defending the Constitution. The threats of violence that were there, and there's all kinds of rumors about whether it's, there's some ongoing threats of violence. The false information, the social media. Social media has really had a tremendous amount of effect on this whole thing. And there's a good resource that I left for you on the resource slide. It's called The Battle Against Fake News, and it's done by Science News. And NPR did a research study, which I thought was very interesting. It said 83% of the people are worried about the spread of false information. But when less than 50% were able to identify the false QAnon conspiracy theater that pedophile Satan worshippers are trying to control politics and media. So basically, even though people are worried about that, people are having trouble. Where do I get my sources? And those of you who all know in terms of social media, if you get on one particular side or certain topics, they feed you more information of the same political bent. So, and people unwittingly share misinformation. They find that if it's on a video, people believe it a lot more because I've seen it. And there's another thing, misinformation tends to lodge in the brain, so it's really hard. How do we get it out when somebody has this misinformation? And what we tend to do is we tend to accept the information that aligns with what you already know. And one of the things that how they can affect us is also fires up the emotions, okay? And there's a lot of discussion about the pre-debunking things, people who are lazy thinking, they just kind of hear a piece of it, they're inattention, and how do we teach people critical thinking? Anything that's new or novel tends to get a lot of hits, and people are very interested in it. And the other thing is, we hear it again and it's repeated, we assume it's true, which is not necessarily true. That's actually the political thing is sometimes do. But sometimes it overwhelms our reasoning skills, and some people are not taking protective actions about it. There's in that same Science News resource, it's called Anatomy of Misinformation. So we've got science. Who do we believe? We believe in Dr. Fauci, CDC. What are our sources of hesitancy? This whole thing about vaccinations. Now, there's another article in there about the vaccine hesitancy. That's not new. That's been going on throughout the ages. And it basically has something to do with people distrusting the scientific institutions and the government. So, and unfortunately, the pandemic has been politicized, which has been made, really tough. And what we need to do now is those of us who have been vaccinated, we have new rules of what we can do, but we haven't socialized. We haven't had the same kind of conversations with people here. As a matter of fact, there was some kind of, there's a new thing called social re-entry anxiety. So when I'm getting out, am I going to meet with people? Am I going in a restaurant? Am I taking my mask off? Who do I meet with? How do I know whether they really got their shots or not? Who do I trust? There's a whole thing new about that. I don't know about you, but we're constantly readjusting as to what am I going to do and what am I not going to do. And so that adds. So we're not going to solve any of these problems right now, although I'm going to talk about a couple of things you may want to consider. But I think we need to realize that it does make a difference in terms of our stress levels. I said in the past, I did some stress groups, and what people finally said, you're not talking about the political part. And that's the part that's really driving me nuts. So anyway, basically, we're a divided nation, and it may seem unresolvable, but it is both possible and imperative that we find some kind of common ground. And the APA is a real good article, also referenced in there, called "The Healing the Political Divide." We have to understand the various factors, what affects us and what divides us. And we need to think a second about your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. What are some psychological factors at play in that? Basically, they're finding that what we call existential fear, people are scared. And that's what drives our polarization. And if we've had some kind of trauma or something like that, a lot of people feel that they're insignificant and nobody really cares about them. So I'm just one of the group. So all these political decisions and all this stuff that's going on is really not taking care of me. One of the things we need to remember is that most people are not at the extremes. And yet when we hear on the news and through our political people, we hear about the extremes because it's more exciting and people, they get more hits on their websites when they do it. And we need to be aware of not conceptualizing that everybody else is on the other side. So what we're doing is we're doing, me or them. It's the opposite. So we're polarized. We're helping with the polarization. So we need to be aware of it. And unfortunately, there's certain kinds of leadership that is fomenting the polarization. They find that it's helpful. Usually it's feelings of fear and misinterpretations of others is one of the issues that we're dealing with. It's going to continue to grow if we have fear, and it's fueling it unless we address it. So that's the reason I decided we need to talk about this. We need to be open about this. And we need safe, highly structured dialogue groups where we can kind of share and talk about what we really think. Things really are not that black and white. And no matter what a person's political politics, there's usually some gray area in there that we can agree upon. So we need to let go of our tendency to bring somebody to our side. You don't want to walk away. You don't want to argue with people. And we don't want to make assumptions based on their vote. I don't know if anybody else there, and I've talked with lots of people, they keep saying, well, I can't be friends with them or my relative or something. I don't want to see them anymore because they voted the wrong way. We need to show some curiosity and respect for someone else's view. We may not always agree with it, but that's what's going to help bring our political divide back together. It needs to be a face-to-face discussion. We need to be mutually respectful of one another and be curious about why they're thinking and how they're thinking about things. We need to really be able to listen. And this is sometimes really tough because you may be cringing at the time, but you have to really be willing to listen. Neither side's going to accomplish anything without some active cooperation of the other side. If we remain polarized, we're not getting anywhere. Okay? So I don't know if any of you have any relationships with people that you love or you care about who feel very differently. They're on the other side of the thing. And so how do you have a discussion with them? If you have somebody who has embraced conspiracy theories, maybe you feel outraged, or maybe you just caring about these people and you're kind of struggling between the two. Remember, we don't have control over anybody else, and we're going to talk about control a little bit later. But if I'm getting together with people, maybe it's going to expose me, so maybe I'm not willing to do that. So you're going to have to set some boundaries with people and control what you can control. So let me just review a couple of things, some of which come from an article by Amanda Ripley. You guys, CERT members should all know about her book, The Unthinkable. If you don't, you need to read that. And she has a blog, and her blog, the title of her blog is How to Talk with People Who've Apparently Lost Their Damn Minds. Okay. The title really gets you, but you need to listen, read what she says. First of all, you need to prepare yourself. If you're having a meeting with somebody, what is the thing that I really love or care about this person? You want to, what am I worried about in terms of this conversation? And what would it feel like to be connected with this person, even if you totally disagree with them, okay? You want to set a tone of complexity, humility, and curiosity, because that's contagious. Everything is not so black and white. It's not so easy. We need to be a little humble about maybe we're not always right about everything. And if we show curiosity, even if the things that people are saying just feel totally off the wall to us. If we're asking genuinely about what they're thinking and why they're thinking, that's helpful. Basically, I don't know everything about the virus or how to mitigate the risks. No one does. So I'll just tell you what I'm comfortable with right now. That might be something you might want to say. You don't want to get into a debate over the facts. You are not going to win this. It's just not going to work. So a lot of them come, well, I've got the CDC, well, I've got Dr. Fauci, whatever. You don't want to have this conversation over the phone. You want to talk in person. That's just absolute. It's not going to work if you're not doing it in person because there's a certain connection there. Okay. You want to listen ways that people can see. Reflect back what you hear people say. And if you can find some things that you agree upon, if nothing else, we're probably all anxious about the whole thing, making it hard to make decisions about things. Okay. And you can say, it sounds like you're not worried about being sick for yourself and you're really frustrated by all the restrictions and closures. And we were all there. We're all frustrated about the restrictions and closures. So there are things you can agree upon. You want to respond to false information or dubious logic with curiosity, not, oh, how dumb can you be, or I disagree with you, or whatever. It's really hard to do this, but if you can get yourself curious, you can't fake it. But really, I've never heard of that. How do you know it's true? That's so interesting because what I've read and, where do you get your information these days? So those are the kinds of things. So people really think you're listening to them, okay? You want to acknowledge there is no perfect solution, and everything has a cost. There's risk and no risk about what we're doing and what we're choosing not to do. And the one thing you probably don't want to do is sever those relationships, because if these are people that are important to you, you probably want to continue those. Okay, so now that I've gotten you all stressed thinking about some of these things, I don't know. Can you put in chat some of the things that may be affecting you, and kind of real briefly, so that Betsy can kind of share them with us a minute? Okay.
I do have one question here, Sue. Why encourage in person when we are still mostly masked and distancing? So I think that's just evidence of one of the questions that people have that causes stress.
Well, I think that's the other problem with the masks too. You can't see the facial expression or whatever, but that in person, especially if you're going to disagree, it's much easier to disagree at a distance. As a matter of fact, I know when I've done conflict stuff like that, I want to be next to the person. I want to talk next to the person, be body languages, all that kind of stuff that you miss when you're doing it over Zoom. So that's, if you can do it, if you can do it outside, or those kinds of things, those are considered. If not, you may want to wait until you're comfortable. And the other thing is, sometimes there may be people you don't trust as to whether they've had their vaccine or not, and if that matters to you. I mean, you have to make those decisions. Those are personal decisions. Anything? Anyway, I'd like you to just think in terms of this. Normally when I teach psych first aid, we talk about how we're going to help other people. Because not all of us have been through some kind of trauma, but the reality is we all have, and whether we like it or not. And so I kind of want us to personalize this a little bit, okay? First of all, how do you respond to stress, both physically and emotional? If you think of, how you were impacted, do you act differently than you normally do? And in what ways? And what experiences might have helped you? What you learn from this? I mean, how did you get through it? How did other people react? And how did that affect you? If your own family was either calm or excited or something like that? What about strangers? Just even the panic of, society. We better go out and get that toilet paper. And this last week was, we better go out and get gas. Well, I decided to wait a couple of days and I had no trouble getting gas. I wasn't going to sit in hours in line about something. But it's that group panic sometimes that affects us. How might anticipation of a potential disaster affect your reaction? Does that help you? Has the length of the pandemic or difficulty recovering affect you? We now all have experience with this. And I don't think we always know. Those of you who've read the Amanda Ripley book, The Unthinkable, we need to know what our disaster personality is. Do you know how you're going to respond in a situation? Years ago, we were on a hiking trip with some friends, and we were doing Old Rag. Those of you who, I don't know if those of you know it, but it's a long trip, and there's one place that's very steep, and you're on these little cliff things on the side of the mountain. And one of our friends blacked out. We thought he was having a heart attack. And you wonder, now what are you going to do? How do you respond to stuff like that? We're in the middle of the wilderness. We're nowhere. It turns out I was above the top of the mountain, and I had trouble getting there because I'm not strong enough to pull my body up with just my hands. And so I decided I was going to call 911. But we're not sure how we're going to do it. Would it have been better for me to go down? And it turns out it was around Easter Sunday, and a bunch of people came by and they prayed for him. I'm not very religious, but thank you. Somebody came by. He would wake up and black out again. Okay, and somebody gave him Gatorade and something to eat. Then a doctor came by and treated him for shock. An EMT came by and called his vitals up to me so I could tell people 911 because I was at the top of the mountain. I had good reception. And all those kinds of things did happen. And in the metropolitan area, we're likely to see that we're going to have that kind of help. But it is really scary. What happens? How are you going to respond? And I think I learned something about myself at that time. Can I stay calm? And how do you get through things like that? Okay. How do you think people reacted after the Twin Towers? Those of you who read The Unthinkable, it was real interesting to work with people who were at the Twin Towers, who had made it out, and why they made it out. The people who were able to make quick decisions and moved out, made it in time. Their coworkers did not make it out. So if you want some more information on how to deal with some of those things, we also have the Until Help Arrives class. Okay. Now, stress is basically a normal reaction in normal people to an abnormal event. This was my hair during COVID. It's normal. It's a natural to feel grief, anxiety, and worry during the COVID thing. And it's our body's physical and mental reaction to events and circumstances that frighten, excite, confuse, anger, or irritate. We don't always have the kind of control. We'd like to think we have control over that, but we do not. Okay? These are just some stress reactions, and I'm going to go through them: the psychological, physical, behavioral, cognitive, and spiritual is a new category that they just added. But once again, stress is normal. Okay, so how do you respond to stress? How have you done that? Well, there's the psychological stuff. For example, irritability or anger, blaming others, somebody else's fault. Do you isolate? You withdraw? Are you worried about it? Not sleeping at night, worried about what's happening. The problem is we feel powerless and helpless, and that's not a real good feeling. Some people feel sadness and grief and depression. Some people denying, oh, this is no problem. We saw in the news, this is just the flu, don't sweat it. It may affect your concentration and your memory. When we're under stress, we don't think as clearly. And it also affects our relationships. When things are not going well, we don't do as well with other people. If you had a bad day and somebody says something to you, just kind of growl at them, as opposed to, if things are going well, somebody says the same thing, you just kind of let it go off your back. Now, a couple of things I wanted to ask about. Does anybody know what the clinical signs of depression are? Basically, depression is anger in or out. You can just, you can get depressed or whatever. Anybody know what the clinical signs of depression? If you if you want to unmute or just write it in chat, that would be good. Anybody? I know you all know what depression is. Now, there are two kinds of depression. There's major depression, which is kind of a chemical, physiological thing, where you can't get out of bed, where you may need medication, you may need hospitalization or something else like that. And it's what we call dysthymia, which is a low-level depression. It's kind of, the world is kind of gray. So there are different kinds of depression. When we're looking at depression, when you've had some major trauma, shock, or something like that, people feel depressed. And the things we look for clinically is your sleeping and eating changes. Sleeping, not being able to fall asleep at night, waking up a whole bunch of times in the middle of the night, not being able to get back, or waking up early in the morning and you just can't get back to sleep. Now, some people are that way. Other people are the opposite. They hibernate. They go into the blankets for 10, 12, 14 hours a night. So we're looking for a change in sleep patterns. Okay. The second thing
So
is,
I do have some answers here.
oh, cool.
There's lack of motivation to do anything.
Yep, that's one.
Feeling of helplessness, anger turned inward,
Yep,
headaches, suppressed affect, loss of interest, withdrawal from people, and being down for more than a few days.
that's right. Those are all right. Those are all right. And the things, all of those affect when we talk about the change in sleeping or eating. And that's how, as a clinician, those are on my checklist. But the change of sleeping and eating are the ones that I'm really going to look at. Okay. But all of those are symptoms of depression. And most of us at some point in our life, we hit it. We do hit it. Okay. So the change in eating too. Some people, their stomach gets in knots and they can't eat anything. Unfortunately, that's not my problem. I'm just the opposite. I kind of go to the refrigerator, anything that's not green or fuzzy. You know, you just kind of stuff your face. You didn't even like it, but you just kind of ate it. I don't know if you know, but after 9/11, restaurants changed the way they serve people food. They have much more comfort food. They have more meatloaf and mashed potato kind of stuff. They actually changed their menus. So these are just some of the psychological things. I don't know. How do you deal with stress? Is this, you know, how have you dealt with some of this? Okay. The other thing is their physical symptoms, like a loss of appetite. Some people get headaches or chest pains and stuff like that. If you're ever getting chest pain, even if you think it's something else, please get it checked out with the doctor. Okay. Some people get gastrointestinal problems, nausea. Some people get hyper. Some people use drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, which does not help in the long run. Um, First of all, do you know what kind of drug alcohol is? Anybody? It's a depressant. So if I'm asking you, would you like some a depressant medication? Look at me. Why would I do that? And that's what we're doing when we're drinking alcohol. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have some to relax, but you need to be aware of how much it is because it will affect it. It is just a natural depressant. Nightmares, fatigue, and things like that. Okay, once again, all these are normal reactions, normal uh, stress. Some of the negative things, the social withdrawal, isolation, and avoidance. I don't know how many people hide, hid in their houses. And I do really feel for those of you who may have been on your own during this situation. If nothing else, even if you don't like the person you live with, you had somebody to talk with. The fact that everybody wanted a pet and you couldn't even get a rescue anywhere, I think that says something. People needed that connection. It affects your relationships. Once again, when you're uptight, you're not usually as nice to people. You don't work as well. I don't know if you know, but when you're under stress, you work about 2/3 efficiency. Anybody care to tell their boss they're doing 2/3 of their job? Doesn't do real well. There's talks about death or suicide, crying easily and fearful. And this pandemic, I mean, considering the number of people who died, most of us know somebody or, or at least, have some kind of connection with somebody who's been ill or died. Okay. Problems with impulse control, scapegoating, and things like that. Now, the other difference, the other side of that is there was some bondings and some empathy and altruism doing that. If you noticed all the people offering people to food and all kinds of things like that, there was some real positive stuff that came out of this. And those of you who work with CERT, I don't know how many of you have done the food deliveries and the vaccination clinics and stuff like that. That makes a difference. And we're going to talk about the increased oxytocin that helps on some of those things. Okay.
Sue, someone has asked a question.
Yes.
Are there differences in how men versus women show depression?
Probably, I would say no. However, men are more likely to deny depression. Excuse me. Men are more likely to deny depression. When I was counseling, what I found is there were more men who there was something going on. They had stress and they said, yeah, I can deal with it. And they'd stuff it. And they had another situation. Yeah, no big deal. I can stuff it. And they'd stuff it and stuff it and stuff it until they wound up with symptoms of a heart attack or bleeding ulcers and wound up in the emergency room. As females, we're more likely when we get upset, we're more likely to talk about it, cry about it, get mad about it. And I'm much more comfortable, more happy with somebody who's doing that. I really am. I worry about the people who keep it in because it's going to come back and get you later. I guarantee you it's going to come back. So in terms of the population, I don't know statistically whether there are more men or women depressed. More women talk about it and get help for it. I'm not sure. I really am not. That's something I'll look up, I promise. But can't give you the answer right now. But it's going to impair your concentration. That's why you're not doing as well. If you've ever had a loss or something else like that, and you're just not focusing, you're making mistakes. After there's a death or loss or something like that, especially if you work in the financial industry where things have to be exact and stuff like that, somebody needs to, you need to take some time off. People need to double check things. Your decision-making ability is not as good. Your memory not be as good. You may not believe things. You may be confused. It affects your self-esteem and how you take care of yourself. So there can also be flashbacks and worries. Matter of fact, one of the things at this point, if somebody starts getting sick right now, somebody gets some kind of breathing, they get some kind of allergy or something like that. I imagine there are plenty of people who go, oh my God, I've got COVID. So I think, those flashbacks, or especially something is getting worse. Cognitive symptoms, I'm already there. There's a new category they've added. It's always been there, but we never categorized it. The loss of hope and limited expectations about life. Am I going to make it? Especially, I'm older, those of us, are we, things like that. Some people will become very religious, and some people that really helps for. Other people is going, why me? I remember my grandfather saying, if there's a God, why is this happening? And I thought that was kind of interesting. But sometimes we kind of take a look at our meaning and the importance of life. So if you have any of those symptoms, think about those. Which ones affect you, okay? Now, people are always asking, what about kids? Well, basically, I'm going to spend the whole hour on just doing that, but the reactions are very similar to that of adults. Some little kids may start clinging. They might not want their parent to leave the house. One of my favorite stories is my mom was a school teacher, and she had a kid who, really good student, all of a sudden stopped coming to school. And she wondered what's going on. And it turns out she found out that the mother had a miscarriage. And in trying to be nice to the kid or protect the kid, said, we lost the child. So what happened is the kid said, well, you lost the child. You didn't even look for her. I'm not going to school. You lose me. So, I mean, it's kind of a funny story, but it's, it was real serious, that clinging, separation anxiety and stuff like that. Kids tend to regress in terms of feeding and toileting and stuff like that. You may be getting more physical complaints, stomach aches, headaches, etc. You're getting some sleep disturbances. Remember, each individual children react differently, and no one child, one may be withdrawn, another just can't stop talking. Also, everything we're talking about is normal reactions. With the infant to 2-year-old, you may get the cranky crying and wanting to be held. The preschool to the kindergartner may regress. The other thing you may have is what we call magical thinking. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a kid thinking if they thought something, then it happened. So I wished, I was angry at my mother. I wished she died, and then she died, thinking that they caused it. Or I was bad, and that's why the plane crashed, or something else like that. They believe that kind of stuff, and we need to kind of help clarify with them. The 7 to 10-year-old may be sad, mad, or afraid it'll happen again. And they're going to have trouble concentrating. The pre-teenager or teenager, they may be irritable or guilty, and they may start to either withdraw or detach or get aggressive and act out. So they may want to use drugs, they may be combative. It kind of exacerbates what they're going through at that stage. Remember, with teenagers, the frontal lobes are not fully developed. Intelligence develops in the back of the brain, but the frontal lobes is what I call the parental unit, the one that organizes and plans and ahead and things like that, is not fully developed until close to 30, late 20s, early 30s. My opinion is it's later in guys, but you can question me on that later. But the reality is teenagers don't have good judgment. And we're just lucky that as many of them keep out of as much trouble as possible, because they're not worried about things like that. Okay? If in an emergency, if you have a kid whose parent is not around, find somebody like a grandparent or other people to, get them with. Get them, engage them in activities, set up a routine for them, because that really helps. Be very aware of not letting them be re-traumatized. So if there's something that bad happened, like after 9/11, you didn't want the kids to keep watching that on TV because they kept thinking it was happening again. They didn't conceptualize that. Be aware that kids mimic your behavior. So if you're calm, they're going to be okay. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with kids and kids will calm. The parent walks in, they're upset, all of a sudden the kid's hysterical. That's catching, okay? With teenagers who may be acting out, one thing you can do is give them a job. Even young kids can do it. They can help other people. Can you hand this bottle of water to somebody? So if you're dealing with a disaster, something like that, that's always very helpful. Okay.
So we're about the halfway point now. If you want to give everybody a little bit of a break, 5-minute break.
Okay, why don't we do that? Okay. And plus my slideshow's not working, so maybe we can work on that.
We'll fix that.
That is not working.
So we will come back at
give 5 minutes if you would.
Yeah, 6:48. Or sorry, 7:49. Just before 7:50.
Terrific. And why is my slideshow not working? Oh, there it goes. Aha. Okay, got it. I guess I have to click in a particular place. Then we have to skip some stuff because we're going to go over. Hey, James.
How you doing?
Okay.
It's going well.
Good.
I'm always amazed how much I learn. I listen and listen. I listen more and more the more I learn.
Thank you. It's good to know.
I'm so confused with all this, all these all these virtual all these virtual classes or these presentations. It just gets so confused. There's so much going on right now, with everything.
Yeah. And getting things to work. Are you hearing a hum from me? Is that annoying? They tell me that my computer's humming.
It sounds like there's a little feedback in the background, but when you're going through the lecture, I'm not really paying attention to it. I'm
Good.
trying to focus on you and listening, but there is a little feedback in the back, yeah. But you're coming through loud and clear on the audio without the headset.
Good.
That's right, Sue. No, it's very little. It's good.
Good. I think I could get the headset I was using is a real good one. My husband uses it for singing. He's in one of those rock groups. And so it's a good headset. And if that's not working, then it's probably my laptop.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of a hum. It's not coming clear at all. It's like a hum and a little bit of an echo.
But if I moved it, I might be able to get it, but it doesn't seem to. Okay. I'm getting a new desktop, but I'm not getting a new laptop. This one's relatively new. So. Betsy, you can let me know when we're on time. I'll go back.
Couple minutes.
Looks like we have about half of the people who signed up. A little less, a little more.
Yeah, I got 44.
Yeah, that's good.
For what it's worth, I don't hear any background noise right now, but others may report differently. I've got one person who's having significant noise from time to time, but hopefully.
It sounded like music, like if you had a radio on.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Don't.
Was it good music?
Yeah, it was just- I did get a phone call in the middle of it. I forgot to turn it off, my phone off. I apologize. I think I should get fired for that. I don't think there's even music on this computer.
Like the articles and stuff like that. Is that did they send that with the PowerPoint, or so you can follow up with those articles after the presentation's over?
Yeah, they're on the. They're going to put it on the website, and I
Okay.
whole series of articles. There's some really good ones, especially about the political stuff, about on resilience, on dealing with trauma, and a whole bunch of stuff on relaxation, different relaxation techniques. Anything I'm referring to is going to be there, because I decided that instead of Betsy having to post everything, that just gets old.
So which website will it be on? Which one?
It's the volunteer hub.
Oh,
Go
the
to
volunteer hub one. Okay.
Yes. So I think you can go ahead and start now.
Okay. I don't know. I think it's going to be on the website, the CERTCon website, isn't it? The resources. I can always put it on.
Sorry, the attendee hub. Pardon me.
Okay.
The wrong attendee hub. Right.
No. Anyway, what are some of the mediating factors that we deal with here? If there's a warning, we usually do better as opposed to when there's no warning, because we can kind of prepare. If it's natural or man-made, basically, we deal better with natural disasters than man-made, especially, terrorist kinds of things, like that. Prior experience with a similar event, do you think that helps or not? Why don't you put a yes or no in there? You think it helps, yes, or doesn't help? I'm just curious, because I'm going to be talking about it. The bottom line is it really makes a difference. If people come from a war-torn country, they may be more used to things, or maybe they're more scared of it. For example, they may be more scared of the police or the government or something like that. There's a whole lot of differences depending upon that. I know during we had an earthquake here a couple of years ago, and I was kind of like uptight about it because things were flying off my bookcase, and people from California going, so a lot depends upon what your experience is before.
There are a lot of yes answers.
Yeah.
A lot of yes answers.
And as I say, it can affect. Good. The intensity of the disruption, how bad it was. Most of the time when we're talking about disasters of CERT members, we're talking about how it's affecting other people as opposed to how it's affecting us. And what's the impact of disruption? You're pretty much living your life okay. It's not much change. Or your kids home, or you're losing your job, or financially. I mean, there's so many things going on. Somebody really sick, somebody really close to you sick. That's going to make a difference. And how you feel about the event. I know there's a lot of fear and stuff like that. Where's it coming from? I know there's a lot of political stuff about, where we got COVID from and all that kind of stuff. The meaning of it to the individual. Is it, and the emotional strength of the person going in. So for example, maybe you had some emotional issues, you were depressed or something else like this is maybe add to it, or maybe you kind of, you're okay. And I think as a CERT member, we need to know how well we deal with those kinds of things. Can we roll with them or not? I don't know about you. My tendency is I can roll with them pretty well. Sometimes later I'll go, oh, wow, what just happened? But most of the time, or do you freeze? What happens with you? And the length of time since the event. I think a lot of people are just, for example, 9/11, especially the younger people who weren't alive during that just doesn't have the same impact that maybe to some of us who kind of thought that, we felt pretty secure before that in our place. And the most important thing is the social systems. One of the things they found after Katrina was the people who do best were the people who had social supports. Okay, not whether your house was better or anything else like that. The people who had those emotional social supports did better. And okay. What's a traumatic crisis? It's an event that's experienced or witnessed which affects your ability to cope. It could be a death or injury. It could be serious injury. It could be your house, your neighborhood, your possessions, or loss of contact with your family or close friends. What happens? And what did COVID do with us? How many people had death or injury, serious injury? Anybody dealing a long haul right now? Most of our homes were probably okay, but maybe there was stuff going on in the neighborhood and stuff like that. A lot of us lost contact with people, so that's been a big issue for this. There's an automatic response to immediate stress. There's adrenaline rush. Your heart is racing. Your breath increases. The blood is shunted to the muscles, and what happens is you sometimes lose finer motor skills because basically the body is taking care of the core organs. Pain sensation decreases, they're endorphins, so you seem to be able to do things that you would not. All of a sudden you go, oh my God, I'm really injured. This is really bad. You might not notice because your endorphins are going. Some of your senses get better, some of your senses get worse. Sometimes you see better. Some people see better in those situations and their eyes get better permanently. Sometimes it goes back to where it was. Sometimes we focus on, we have tunnel vision. We only focus on one thing. And we're not looking at anything else like that. Sometimes time may seem to go slow or fast or down fast. When you had something traumatic or something happened to you, let's say, sometimes doesn't it feel like it happened forever? And you find out, well, that was only 2 seconds or 3 minutes or a minute or something like that. It seems that trauma seems to make a big difference. That's that autonomic nervous system and that stress response, the fight or flight stuff. There's something like 1,400 biochemical or psychophysiological changes in the body when something happens. Okay, so lots going on and it's things we don't have control over. But traumatic stress, once again, affects our cognitive function, our thinking. You may think you're going crazy. And once again, you're working at 2/3 efficiency, okay? It affects your physical health. The more stress you're under, the more likely you are to get sick, okay? It increases the endorphins and the cortisol levels in the frontal lobe, in the brain. And what happens is it makes you much more vulnerable to everything, whether it's cancer, stroke, or heart, or the flu, or anything else like that. So especially during this time, it's really important that we keep our stress levels down, okay? Because that makes us much more vulnerable to everything else. And our interpersonal relationships, that really makes a big difference. Now, we talk a lot about PTSD, or post-traumatic stress, and just a brief history of that I think is just fascinating. In the 17th century, they began investigating psychological trauma, what it was caused by. In 1871, in the Franco-Prussian War, they called it nostalgia. I think that's incredible. In Germany, the military called it homesickness. During World War II, Freud called it war neurosis. And in World War I, they called it shell shock. So they have lots of different names over the whole thing. But one of the things to remember too, when you've had some kind of major trauma, PTSD, the hippocampus actually stores those memories. And sometimes they're really hard to deal with those kinds of things, okay? Now, how well do people get past PTSD? There's post-traumatic symptoms can last from a few days to a week, generally. The first month, there's acute distress disorder. After 1 month, we start saying, hey, maybe that's PTSD. But most symptoms resolve within about a month. And yet PTSD can last their lifetime. So there are things that we get traumatically initially, but we get past them. If we talk about the World Trade Center, the people who lived on south of 110th Street, after 1 month, 7.5% were still affected. After 4 months, 1.6%, and after 6 months, 0.6%. So a majority of people can get past it, okay? Now, one thing we're going to do now is...
Sue, excuse me?
Yes.
One person wanted you to please repeat the statistic about 2/3 of the brain.
Oh, about when we're under stress, we're working about 2/3 efficiency.
I see.
Okay. So tell your boss it's not your fault. It's that you're under a lot of stress. Okay. And but we do get over PTSD pretty quickly. Now I want to just talk about teacher box breathing. Some of you may know it, some of you may not know. It's a way of slowing down and regulating your breathing, which can add additional benefit to slows your heart rate. And it's something that we all need to know for when things are stressful. So we're going to go through it, okay? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to want you to breathe in, hold it, breathe out, hold it, and breathe in, hold it. So we're going to start again, okay? Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully that's real good. Hopefully that helped relax you a little bit, and you see what you can do. We can actually make a difference in the way we're feeling. We can change the physiology. We can change how we're feeling. So next time you're stressed and something's going on, take a couple of seconds and do that for yourself. It's pretty simple, okay? Now, one thing I wanted to talk about, because we're talking about COVID, is grief and loss. There's been a tremendous amount of grief and loss. And there are normal responses to loss, life, and it makes drastic changes to your daily lives and your way of life. The grief reactions basically initially are shock, disbelief, and denial. We don't really believe that's happened. This is going to be a bad dream. I'm going to wake up. Then there's anxiety about what's happening. Then you may feel distress and sadness. Depression is often a normal reaction in that. There may be anger for what happened. There may be anger at the person who's dying. And some people feel guilty about doing that the person left me, okay? And it often affects our sleep and our appetite. There's a lot of good information on that. If you've been dealing with death or loss, I really recommend that you read about it and join a grief or loss group, okay? Okay. People may have experienced multiple losses during the disaster, or if there's a large-scale emergency. And because of COVID, what's worse is we were not able to be with our loved ones when they died. We weren't able to mourn the person with family and friends like we usually do. It may affect things like your job and money, how you can survive after that, loss of support services. And there is a thing called complicated and prolonged grief, which people go through when they find it harder to adapt to things. Now there is, what do you do when somebody is dealing with grief or loss? There's a great quote that I love, and I'm going to read to you by Henry Nguyen. A friend who can be silent with us in a moment of confusion or despair, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, that is a friend indeed. And I love that quote because sometimes when you have somebody who has a loss or grief or something like that, the only thing we can do is we can be with somebody. You're not going to fix it. I'm not going to bring somebody back. I can't make it better or whatever. What I can do is be with somebody. Now, some of us are okay being with other people when they're hurt, angry, depressed, or sad or something like that. Some of us are not. And you need to know if that's something you can do. And that's okay. If that's not one of the things you can do, especially in a disaster, let somebody else do some of the psychological first aid. Okay, one of the things that's coping with grief is connecting with other people, inviting people, sharing stories. One of the things I love doing, I do a lot of grief work, is people share stories and fun things about people. They'll do something to honor somebody, put in a tree or do something like that, or create a poem for them. Creating memories and rituals. One of the nice things, we used to do scrapbooks for kids when their parents died or for family members. Now we do it digitally, they're online. There's lots of good grief sites where you can kind of start a thing and people write stories and tell pictures and things like that. That's a really nice thing to do. When you're grieving yourself, ask for help for others. As CERT members, we're into helping other people, but sometimes it's important to let other people help us, and get some grief counseling. We need to acknowledge the loss and the feelings of grief. We need to process it. My experience has been as a counselor, as a psychologist, that if you don't process, they're going to come back later. So it's not like you can just, if you stuff them, they're going to be there. And it'll affect also your ability to make changes in the future, because change means an ending and a beginning. And grief is it's an ending of something and a new beginning. And if you don't process that, it really affects your ability to make change. You want to create new rituals. Do we, light a candle? Do we do something in honor of that person? Do we eat the food that they loved or something like that? And if one of the things is sometimes focusing on the present, and things you can control, what I can control and what I can't. This is something that all CERT members should know all about. First of all, getting enough sleep. How many of you get, say, 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night? Can you just put the number in there in the chat so that Betsy can tell me how many people? My bet is that most of you don't do that, okay? Adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And it's kind of the red badge of courage. Well, I live on 3, well, I live on 4, or something like that. We're not functioning. Our bodies need that, okay? The other thing that exercise regularly, now people are going, oh, give me a break. The reality is, every time I go to a workshop on stress or whatever, the magic bullet is some kind of exercise. I don't care what you do. You can walk your dog, you can garden, you can, I don't care, you can play a sport, it doesn't matter. But moving is really, really important. And that really reduces your stress levels. It makes a difference. And remember, I was talking earlier about how vulnerable you are to stress. And I frankly can't afford to, as you are really stressed, it affects everything, including your aging. People age faster over stress than they do over their age. Now, I'm old, so I need to worry about that. Have you ever watched our presidents, how they age over the years? They age a lot more when they're in the White House than they ever did, okay? Just one other thing that I learned recently that I think is a fun fact is the brain weighs about 3 pounds, and it's made of a soft tofu-like material. Now, I'm not a tofu lover, but anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
Sue, back to the sleep question, we had a variety of answers, and they all ranged from anywhere from 5 to 6 hours to 7, 6, 7. One person had 9 hours, lucky them, and one person really just laughed. I guess they did.
Which my bet is that was not between 7 and 9 hours, right?
Exactly.
Because it is really crucial for us. We need at least 7 hours of sleep a night, and we're not getting it. We are not, and especially even now when we're working at home or on our computers, we don't even have that boundary. So I just really, you need to think about that. That's going to make you more vulnerable. It's going to age you more. So I know it's kind of anyway. So the exercises, you need a balanced diet. Balance work and play, and that's that whole thing. Why are you not getting enough? And sometimes, we get so tired, we can't get to sleep. We get hooked up on something. I don't know about you, but I'm into the jigsaw puzzles, and I'll get so involved in that. Use relaxation techniques. Allow yourself to receive as well as give. So those of us in CERT, we're into giving to every people, but we need to let other people do for us. Connect with others. That emotional connection is really important. And use spiritual resources. Those are the things that are, too important. So anyway, that's interesting. Somebody laughed about the sleep. Yeah, most of us, I can say that most of us, when I do this in a group, there are usually only maybe 1 or 2 people who get enough sleep. Okay, there are lots of different relaxation techniques, and all of these resources are going to be on the resource list in the website, okay? But if you don't already have it, there's an app called Breathe to Relax with the number 2 in the middle, and it can the relaxation exercises on it. It's really easy to do. So if you're out somewhere, if you're stressed at work or something like that, it's a minute or 2. It really makes a difference. If you relax, you can get back and you think better. Sometimes you're under stress and you're trying to think of something you can't do. You need to get your head somewhere else. There's guided imagery, which is kind of a technique, and there's also a link to that When they take you on a vacation, let's say you're going to go sit on a beach and you're going to, you can imagine yourself sitting on the chair relaxing. You feel the sand between your toes. You feel the breeze on your skin. You smell the air and those kinds of things. And just a couple of minutes of that will really change your whole body. As well as, we did box breathing, but that's another way of doing it. Another thing that I recommend, and it's also, there's a link to that, is progressive muscle relaxation. Some of us go, hey, I can't meditate. I can't shut my mind down. What am I going to do? Well, this is something where you're doing something. You start at one part of your body and you tighten it and you relax it and you work all the way through your body till your whole body's relaxed. And it's a neat technique, especially for those people who can't meditate and kind of can't slow down their mind. There's meditation, obviously. And then there's a thing called butterfly hug. I'm sure maybe you've heard about EMDR, rapid eye movement. Well, the butterfly hug is kind of a simplified version of that. It's using the vagus nerves exercise to rewire the brain activity by using both sides of the body itself. And there's a little video coming, and I'd like you to participate with that and see whether it helps or not. I know during COVID, a number of people I've shared this with has found it very helpful. It's very simple, okay?
So I'm going to finish off tonight with just a bit of a graphic. This is called the butterfly hug. You can do it with crossing your thumbs and hands in front of you and alternating here. If it's more comfortable to just tap on your shoulders, you're welcome to do that. If that's not quite comfortable, feel free to go ahead and put your hands on your knees when you're ready to tap gently to yourself. This is a wonderful, wonderful grounding technique. You can take this anywhere. This is whether you take the office to help just bring down that intensity of emotion for a moment, whether at home or before bed. This is really, really beneficial whenever you need to get that emotion down. So for those who like, you're welcome to join me. If it's more comfortable just to watch me, you're welcome to. You can also close your eyes. So whatever's going to be best and most comfortable. So let's go and get started. And let's go and get started by just finding where it's most comfortable for us. Just kind of experience. Does this feel good here? Does this feel good here? Take a moment to find that. When you find that place, let's go and get started with just a deep breath in. So take a deep breath in, and you reach the top, hold for just a moment. And then exhale. Just let it come out as much as you can. And then just slowly start tapping. Just alternating sides, alternating taps. When your breathing chooses to be okay. If you like, you're also welcome to have a positive affirmation to this. You believe in very well. You could be, I can do this. You think I am in a secure and safe place. Whatever seems to fit for what your need is right now. Feel free to just tap that in. Just repeat it to yourself in your head. Just remembering that the tap in the first moment is comfortable. Maybe a little harder. You're welcome to it and be gentle. You can just experience what fits for you right now. You're welcome to do that. And go as short, as long, so you feel just a little bit calmer until you feel that it's good enough.
How'd that feel? People, can you kind of do hands up or hands down and let Betsy know? Did you find that helpful?
So it was a little hard to hear for many people, but I do see some thumbs up. And I told them that anyone that was unable to hear this will be able to get the link in the resources.
The link is on there. Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, why do we teach psychological first aid? That's kind of what we're talking about today. It's basically a Band-Aid. It's a useful skill for everyday lives and emergencies. It's not counseling. We're not making you into counselors, but it helps reduce stress at any time. It's important that you understand your own anxiety and you know when you're going to recognize and refer. If you're dealing with people, as a certain member in a disaster or during one of these situations, you need to know when you're above your head and when you need somebody else to handle. And that's something. So recognizing when you need help. Basically, it's listen, protect, and connect. You can provide comfort and stabilization to people. You want to make sure the scene is safe. People's medical needs are met. Focus on activities that help people cope. You want to make sure people are safe and comfortable. You want to listen to people, talk about their feelings and their physical needs, and acknowledge that all these feelings are normal. Um, we we can offer practical assistance to people. What do they need at this point? Do they need water? Do they need a blanket? Do they need somebody, to sleep? Do they need a bathroom? I can tell you that after the Navy Yard shooting, I was volunteer for the Red Cross, a mental health volunteer for the Red Cross, and my bet is, you wouldn't guess what was the most important thing I did. Well, the most important thing I did first was let people know where the bathroom was. Now that doesn't take a whole lot of, tremendous skill to figure out something like that. The second thing I did was lend people my phone so they could call their relatives. So some of the things that we do are, pretty basic. We're just, giving practical assistance to people. But we also want to provide support by listening and empathizing. And also, are you comfortable listening to somebody else's pain? If you are, fine. If not, then do one of the other jobs. There are plenty of other jobs in a disaster that you can do it. You need to give people information on coping. Okay, but we need. It's great if you have your phone. The breathe to relax thing, or you can teach them box breathing or something like that, or some other thing that might be useful. I know I've done airport exercises before, and I was in the Family Assistance Center, and at some point people were, there was pretend that there was an airplane crash, and people were waiting hour after hour after hour. In a real plane crash, you may not know for a day or two whether your relative's dead or alive, which is pretty sad. But people over time start getting real restless. And what can they do? How can they deep breathe? How can they think about things? How can they focus? And how can they take care of themselves? And so having that information is really helpful. Just even teaching somebody box breathing is tremendous. Okay. Help people link to possible services. What's going to be available? People may need meds. People may need all kinds of different things. And can you help them with that? And help people connect with their natural support systems. In a real disaster, we're going to connect with the people who are right next to us, okay? But over time, if we can connect with the people who we're close to, that's really helpful. Oops.
Sue,
Yeah.
just to give you a heads up, it's 8:15. So if you want to leave time for some Q&A in a little bit,
I'm just going to go through this last part real quickly, okay? In communication, you need to be empathetic and caring. You need to show competence and expertise. Fake it till you make it too. You need to be honest and open. You don't want to reassure people. You want to acknowledge the uncertainty in people's fields and give people things to do. You want to paraphrase, repeat what people say to hear what you heard it back. I really recommend you do that with other people in a relationship. When somebody says something, repeat back what you think you heard. My bet is a good part of the time you're going to be wrong. Okay? Reflect the feeling so that they know you heard. Allow somebody to express their emotion. Use nonverbal cues. Be aware of what somebody's body language is saying. They may say, I'm fine, and they may not be. There was a great, after 9/11, Jeff Mitchell, who developed the PTSD model, was on the rubble at the World Trade Center, and there was a gentleman standing there, and he went up to him and he said, "Are you okay? What can I?" And the guy said, "I'm fine." Well, if you're standing on the rubble after 9/11, he lost a relative, friends, or something like that. He was not fine. And Jeff just stood there next to him for a while. About a half hour later, the guy went to leave, and he said, "Thank you. That was very helpful." So just sometimes being with people and watching their body language. And it's okay to be silent. You're not going to come up with the clues. Okay? You want to put yourself in the speaker's shoes. And how would I feel in that kind of situation? Listen for the meaning, not just the words. People don't even say exactly what they're thinking. Pay attention once again to their body language, and paraphrase what they're saying. Okay. Let people tell their story. Observe and help them slow their breathing. That's the box breathing. Don't interrupt, intrude. Not everybody wants to talk with you. Offer your support. If they don't want it, that's okay. And allow somebody to vent. Somebody may be really angry or frustrated. They may take it out on you. Can you sit there and that's okay? You don't have to defend, well, I didn't mean that or whatever. Okay? And it's not your time to be able to tell them, oh, well, I happened to me. You're supposed to be sitting and listening to somebody else. Some do's is listening, offer respect, be prepared, speak calmly and clearly. Calmly really makes a big difference. Point out the strengths of what they've done. Deal with their immediate needs and share helpful information. Basically, we don't want to do any harm, but assume that people are competent and resilient. Everybody who experiences disaster is not affected the same way. And just human presence really makes a difference. So we focus on the strengths, the resources, and potential. These are basically, we review those, but calmness and listening is basically normalizing. That's it. That's where it's all up, okay? When you think about stress, how do you think about it? Do you think it's good or bad? If you could put in your chat whether you think it's good or bad, like to do that. But what do you do with your own stress? You can change the environment, you can change your thought, or you can change your physical response. Those are three things you have the option about. Okay, and there is a one of the things that I think when we're in a disaster or problem, something like this is what I call a personal power grid. If you take action on something you control, that feels like mastery. Okay. If you try and take action on something you have no control about, that they call it ceaseless striving. I call it banging your head against the wall. If you take no action on things you can control, that's giving up. And if you take no action on things you cannot control, that's letting go. So we need to, as professionals and intelligent people, we try and take control of a lot of things we can't. There are a lot of things going on in the pandemic we can't, some of the grief that people are going through, but we need to know what we control and take action on it. That's mastery, and let go of the rest and stop banging our head against the wall. Okay? Now, what was the response to the good or bad to the stress? Let's see.
Well, there's good, certainly. People use it to grow, and it can be both.
It is both. It's kind of a trick question. It is both good and it's bad. Sometimes it can help us, and sometimes it really, and it depends on how much. If we get up to a certain point, then it becomes negative. But it really can get us to do things. There's a great video, a TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal, talking about stress and how to make stress your friend. When I went to school, everybody said stress was bad, and there are some real good points about it. Stress makes you social. It strengthens your close relationships. The oxytocin, it does it. It motivates you to seek support, and it protects your heart and your cardiovascular system. It helps your heart cells regenerate and from stress damage, and it helps create resilience. Now, that's something that I don't think we thought about. Now, resilience. What do you do to be resilient? Make connections. Do you do these things? Have you done that during COVID? Avoid seeing a crisis as insurmountable, as opposed to this is, we'll get through this. This is going to come. Accept it as part of living. Matter of fact, it is. The older you get, the kind of you think that things go up, things go down. Can you move towards your goal? Take some actions and look for opportunities of self-discovery. Have you done some of those things? Which of these factors apply to you? Do you have those relationships? Can you make plans and implement them? You have a positive view and confidence. How good are you at communicating and problem solving? How good are you managing your own feelings and impulses? And how do you help that in other people? What we like to do is ask what we call getting through and making meaning questions. How did you manage that? What inner strengths did you call upon, and what surprised you most about yourself? Think about that. How do you do with this whole thing? I mean, we've all been through this. How do you manage that? What strengths? And my bet is you had many more strengths than you thought about. Okay? Okay. What not to say? I understand. Don't feel bad. You're strong. You'll get through it. We don't know that. Don't cry. I want people to cry and express themselves. Don't tell me it's God's will. Some people are very religious. That's fine. But if I lost a kid, you tell me it's God's will. That's okay. That's not going to feel okay to me. It could be worse. Yeah. At least you still have that. Somebody said that to a good friend of mine, lost a child a number of years instead. At least you have 3 other kids. Ooh, that was just, and everything will be okay. We don't know that. We're not making promises of what we can't do. What you can say is, I'm sorry for your pain. I'm sorry this happened. Is it all right if I help you with this? I can't imagine what it's like for you. And what do you need? Ask people what they need. Don't be a mind reader. Don't assume that people are traumatized, or, don't talk down to people. Don't assume everybody needs you. Be careful about rumors. Rumors spread, and there are all kinds of fads. Okay. This is one thing that I added before our recent political situation, but I think it's important. I'm going to end with it. If there are threats of violence, what do? First of all, you want to stay calm and listen attentively to the person who's angry. One of the things I like to do is I like to sit down, not across from them, next to them, lower my voice. It's really hard to scream at somebody and be angry at them when you're doing that. You want to maintain eye contact. You want to be courteous and patient. You want to try to keep the situation under control. If somebody's shouting, swearing, threatening, whatever, get some help from somewhere else. Or have somebody call security. But what you want to do is you want to tone things down, and your tone of voice and how you come across really makes a difference. And one of the things that I found over the years when somebody's really angry is I get them to sit down and I ask them, what do they want? Sometimes it's very easy to do. You can give them exactly what they want. Last thing, if you're helping others, I want you to monitor your stress, take time to unwind, take breaks, drink water. This is all the self-care stuff we talk about. Avoid the caffeine and alcohol and tobacco and drugs. There are going to be things you can't solve. Knowing all you can do is do the best. If somebody's lost somebody's died, or somebody's ill, you can't fix it. You can just be there with them. But make sure you've taken care of yourself before. And if you don't take care of yourself, you're useless to everybody else. And if I just like to end with one last thing is, can you think about one thing you learned today, and what's your plan? What can you do about it? Is there one thing that you can change a little bit to make yourself more relaxed, or to help other people, or something like that? And if you can think of something, I appreciate you putting it in the chat with Betsy. Okay. The next couple of the slides are going to be in the handout that you're going to find the resource file. And there are a bunch of phone numbers from different crises. And if you need any follow through with me or something like that, that is my contact information. So if people want to ask any questions, do people have plans? What can you do? Did you get anything out of it? You can say, hey, I'm going to do this a little bit different. I'm going to get a little bit more sleep, or I'm going to do something a little differently.
So Linda had a question earlier that we didn't want to interrupt, and she wanted to know what you meant when you said info on coping. Do you remember what that was referring to?
Okay, for example, how do you deal with stress? How do you make a plan? How do you, what are some of the resources you can use? Help people find resources. Help people make connections. All of those things. But usually in a disaster, hopefully there are going to be handouts and things like that of all that kind of information you can share with somebody. But if nothing else, even if you have nothing else, you can gather as much information about what the resources are there, but you should have a bunch of options on how to get somebody to relax. And that's the first step. Until they can relax, you can't think of anything. Your mind is just kind of all tied up. Anything else?
Leslie commented that she is now going to make even more of an effort to get more sleep.
Great.
Yeah. And there's a question about what might some of the stress symptoms look like for those with dementia, Asperger's, autism, etc.
I think you're going to see some of these, that pretty much the same. We have long lists of the physical, emotional, whatever. But with something like the fear of dementia, that's going to be a major stressful. Knowing as you get older and realizing, I remember my mom just being aware that they were losing it. So part of it is, how do you relax? How do you come to grips with the fact that it's real and that you can't stop it? Do what you can to stop it. You see your doctors, you get your meds and all that kind of stuff. But also, what is your backup plan? Who's going to take care of you? How's that going to be? Knowing that at some point, and all of us, whether we like it or not, we're all going to be in that situation. Unless we die quickly, we're all going to need somebody. And so, unfortunately, sometimes that's early in life. But who's going to be?
What about people that have other mental issues or differences, such as in Asperger's or autism? How would stress come out with that?
Most of those people have learned techniques, and there are a lot of techniques out there, a lot of counselors and stuff like that, and support groups to teach you how to deal with it. What's really interesting in a disaster, sometimes people who've had other mental problems actually do better than other people because they've had to deal with some of these crises before. I worked with the chronically mental health for years, and I was totally amazed at how well they dealt with a disaster. This was just one more thing that they had dealt with. So they had some practice. We talked about prior experience, maybe not great prior experience, but I would, if you have some of those handicapping conditions, there are lots of support groups out there that can teach you ways. How am I going to cope? How do I explain my disability to somebody so that people are, so it's okay at work, it's okay with other people.
And then Gary noted that what he's going to do is focus more on listening than on what I'm going to say next.
I think that is one of the most important things. I really would like everybody here to, with your significant other, whoever you're talking with, repeat back what you heard they said and see whether you got it right. And my bet is a good part of the time you got it wrong. So, I mean, in terms of relationships, it really makes a big difference. And it's not just in a crisis. But in a crisis, remember, everybody's stressed. So we're not always thinking as clearly. Anything else?
Nothing here, but I would encourage anyone who has a question to unmute themselves and speak up. Otherwise, I think we're done.
Yes, and please check out the resources that are going to be on the participant website.
I have a question. My name is Penelope. I had asked in the chat, but I guess it got kind of glossed over. So I noticed that you had said in the beginning that you thought that, we shouldn't let go of friends because of differences and whatnot. But as a African American female, I have been suffering terrible friend loss just because of my race. And I've been dealing with a lot of microaggression and racism. And so I've felt that the healthy thing for me to do is actually to stop being friends with those individuals. And so I obviously it is a difference of opinion because I'm not a racist and I don't want to be associated with racist. So how do you handle those people that are passing microaggressions and passing racism along, and still remain friends with them?
That can be really tough. And sometimes, sometimes you can sit down and have a discussion, or you can sit down and plan and talk about, these are the things I'm noticing. These are offensive to me. This is, I know you're not doing it on purpose and you're not, or whatever. You make an assumption, make a positive assumption about that, and see if you can have that discussion. Sometimes it might be good to have somebody sitting in there and kind of mediating the conversation. So you have a third person listening. Well, wait a minute, or just the tone of the voice, the way you said it, or something like that. The other thing is there are certain relationships that are just toxic and they're not healthy for us. I'm going, I don't need this anymore. This is making me upset. And you can let the person know, or unless we can communicate in a different way, this is not healthy for me. A relationship needs to be good for both people.
Right.
And you may want to check out, the APA has a bunch of it's in the resources, a thing on race and health and those kinds of things. I think they're set up as videos and discussion groups. It might be something that you can look at with your friend and talk about after. And it's the American Psychological Association. They have, there's a whole series on that, racism. Because I don't think, frankly, most of us are really that in touch with how, a lot of us think, well, I'm not racist. But I think there are a lot of those microaggressions and other things we do and say, and we have no idea that we've offended somebody. And I think it's important that we tell each other. We say, hey, and just your tone, the way So anyway, that's just a thought.
I think this has actually taught me to work on my tone, because pardon my French, sometimes I can come off as an ass. So I think that um if I say things that are a little bit less pointed and more sincere, I think it can be taken a little differently.
And say, well, this is the way it comes across to me. Yeah, if you can kind of sit back, sometimes when we get emotional, it's hard for us to say. We need to be able to cool down a little bit and write down, okay, these are the points I'd like to make. Can you listen to them? And you can give me some feedback as if I'm coming across too strong. Let the person know. Matter of fact, in counseling, sometimes we used to do, we have a little sign, or red or green or yellow. So when somebody's saying something that's bothering the other person, you can kind of cue them in without actually interrupting.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anybody?
I wanted to make a comment about reaction. Both my mother and my father had Alzheimer's. And what I found was that when they got stressed or whatever, it usually turned into really severe anger because they didn't understand the changes of what was going on. So it was a matter of trying to de-escalate the situation, and actually sometimes having to remove them from a situation or be aware of what's going on so that it didn't escalate into the anger when they got more and more confused and couldn't understand what was going on. So
that's a real good point. And under most anger, you want to know what somebody's scared of.
Yeah, well, sometimes they couldn't tell me because of
their
dementia. So it's just being aware or reading the signs that they were getting stressed and trying to avoid those types of situations in the future and reading their cues.
I appreciate you saying that, Phyllis. I had asked the question about the Alzheimer's and the Asperger's more from when we are looking at sometimes walking into situations, especially if they were traumatic. We get courses on what to do with folks sometimes, and how they might respond to sounds or directions or strangers. And from a psychological perspective, that's kind of where I was really looking to see if there were some other things, because as you said, in some of the more severe cases, certainly with autism, and depending on how far they are in Alzheimer's, there is not an awareness to self-regulate, and just
Right.
curious if there would be some things from a responder perspective that we could be more aware of. That actually makes me, this conversation makes me feel sort of like that would be something really nice to put together for that community. Thank
Yeah,
you.
what I think in situations like that, what are the best things to do? I'm also a Red Cross. Actually, I'm a regional staff health lead, but one of the things is to get their support persons who know them well in order to help with those types of situations, especially if they're fearful of strangers or whatever. Sometimes that's the only thing you can do, is to get somebody who knows them to help de-escalate situations or help them cope with situations. And actually, if the caregiver has been under stress or whatever, sometimes getting the caregiver then to have to care for the person who either has dementia or some other kind of condition can help them also cope with the situation, as far as getting them to just focus on that one person, can also de-escalate their own feelings about what's going on and just dealing with the immediate the person that they're caring for.
I think that's real good. Making somebody more comfortable, and especially with somebody with Alzheimer's or something else like that, less change, find a comfortable position, comfortable people to be with, and also not take it personally too. Not get defensive, well, I'm doing something wrong or something like that. And understand that there are going to be those times that you can do the best you can, and that's all you can. The same thing in any kind of disaster situation. We try and help, but we can't fix everything. And just being there with somebody, sometimes just giving them a hug And in some ways, treat them, kind of like if it was a kid asking the same thing, what would you be doing? You'd figure they didn't understand, and they probably don't understand. I don't think they understand the underlying fear, but it's got to be scary when you're that out of control, especially if you're a person who grew up being very much in control. Anything else?
I don't see any more questions here.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate your time. I hope this was useful. And check out the resources. And if there are any other questions, that's my contact information. Okay? Thanks again.